Did she really just write his name? He held the envelope between trembling fingers, the gold-embossed stationery trembling like a heartbeat under his touch. The penthouse was silent, except for the city hum below, but every fiber of him screamed. The letter was meant for someone else, someone who didn't exist anymore, and yet here it was. Confessing truths that should have been locked away. He couldn't breathe. Outside, the skyline gleamed like shards of stolen diamonds, mocking him with its unattainable perfection. Her words, delicate and intimate, were a betrayal and an invitation. His thumb brushed the inked lines, tracing her yearning, her doubt, her confession of love for a phantom. The glass of scotch in his hand shivered, spilling like molten regret. The thought that she could feel for anyone else pierced him deeper than any betrayal. And still, the thrill of forbidden desire coiled tighter with every line. The first time he'd seen her, she'd been suspended above the crystal staircase of his gala, a vision in black silk that clung to her like a second skin. The chandelier fractured her into light and shadow. Her laugh had sliced through the hum of power brokers and photographers, and he had forgotten how to breathe. Now, in the sanctity of his private world, that same aura haunted him, inescapable. She had the kind of beauty that made men reckless and women envious, but it wasn't just that. There was fire behind her eyes, a reckless intelligence, a hint of rebellion against a world that demanded submission. His body responded before his mind could negotiate, muscles tensing, heart hammering against ribs that had long since sworn off feeling. Every part of him wanted to bend her into a perfect possession, and yet the part that truly mattered feared losing her entirely to someone he didn't even know. Her entrance into his office was sudden, elegant, unannounced, like a storm cloaked in silk. He looked up from the scattered contracts and letters, and there she was, standing at the threshold with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We need to talk," she said, the words light but tremulous. He gestured to the leather chair opposite him, resisting the urge to pull her close instead. She crossed the room with the confidence of someone who owned the world, though he knew she did not. The weight of her gaze pressed against him like gravity, and the air between them crackled with unspoken questions and desires. Every inhale was a gamble, every word a risk. He studied her, memorized the curve of her neck, the tilt of her chin, the way her hands clenched the hem of her dress when she tried to appear composed. They were both playing a dangerous game, but neither could stop. The revelation hit him like a thunderclap. She had been engaged, or at least writing to someone she intended to marry, and now, by some cruel twist of fate, he had inherited her devotion. He imagined the man she'd loved, the phantom he had never met, and a wave of possessive fury surged through him. The thought of her tenderness being offered to another inflamed every carefully measured decision he'd made over decades. He had been a man who swore off love, who built walls taller than skyscrapers, who trusted power and money above all else. And yet, reading her words, he felt them crumble. Her letter was a map of her soul, her hopes, her fears, everything she had hidden from the world. And now, that map was his. But how could he claim something written for someone else? He found her later that night in the penthouse library, surrounded by leather-bound tomes that smelled of cedar and old money. She was perched on a velvet chair, one leg tucked beneath her, reading a letter she'd written to him, not the one addressed to the phantom, but a fresh confession, drafted in tremulous ink. He approached silently, the quiet click of his shoes against marble announcing nothing. She looked up, startled, and the raw vulnerability in her eyes made him want to scoop her into his arms. "You shouldn't read that," she whispered, and he caught the edge of panic in her voice. He didn't reply, only sank into the chair opposite, letting the tension between them thrum like electricity. Outside, the city lights shimmered like secrets waiting to be uncovered, and inside, their own private storm raged ferocious, inevitable, uncontainable. He offered her a contract the next morning, cold and precise as ice, a merger of lives under the guise of a business arrangement. She recoiled, shock rippling across her porcelain features. "A contract marriage?" she asked, voice shaking, defiance flickering in the depths of her gaze. He didn't flinch, the hard edge of a CEO who never compromised etched into every word. "It protects both of us," he said, though neither could believe it. He wanted control, but he feared desire more. Every glance they exchanged over breakfast silk, napkins, crystal cutlery, champagne still warm was a spark of danger. Their attraction simmered, unspoken, in every brush of a hand, every lingering eye contact. The world outside demanded propriety, but inside his private orbit, gravity had rules of its own. She was both weapon and weakness, and he was powerless to resist either. The first night they shared the same penthouse. It wasn't a bedroom that drew them together, but the balcony overlooking the city. Rain hammered against glass walls, washing the skyline in silver streaks. He lit a cigar, the smoke curling around him like a cloak, and she stood beside him, silent. Her presence was a challenge, a temptation. He wanted to tell her to step back, to preserve boundaries he didn't have the strength to enforce. Instead, he traced a finger along the rim of her champagne glass, the touch electric. "You're dangerous," he murmured. She laughed softly, a sound that cracked something in him. "So are you," she whispered, and for a heartbeat, the storm outside mirrored the one inside. They stood together, caught between desire and restraint, each heartbeat a countdown to the inevitable collision. He discovered her secret one evening when she thought he was elsewhere. Hidden among her belongings, tucked in the spine of a rare book, was a photograph of another man, a ghost of her past. Anger clawed at his chest, but beneath it simmered a strange, possessive ache. She caught his gaze as he confronted her, eyes wide, lips parted, and the truth shimmered between them like glass ready to shatter. "He's gone," she whispered, voice barely audible. He wanted to believe her, but jealousy, primal and blinding, gnawed at reason. She had offered herself to someone else, and now he had to decide whether to claim what he wanted with force or tenderness. The penthouse seemed suddenly too small, the city too loud, their emotions too raw, and yet neither could look away. Late nights were spent in the private theater, curtains drawn against the city's prying eyes. He watched her on screen, a character she loved, a life she imagined, and felt the tug of something unnameable. Every sigh, every laugh, every tear she shed on the silver screen felt like a confession meant only for him. He wanted to tell her she didn't need another name, that no contract could define the storm she had awakened in him. And yet, when she looked at him afterward, unguarded and breathless, desire and fear tangled in her pupils, he realized they were both prisoners of circumstance, power, and longing. The velvet darkness wrapped around them, a silent witness to the tension neither dared break. One morning, he found a message scrawled in lipstick across the bathroom mirror. "Meet me where we first collided." Panic and anticipation surged in equal measure. She was daring him, testing the rules they had both agreed to follow. The penthouse felt too small, the champagne too bitter, the city too distant. He followed her trail, every step punctuated by his own ragged heartbeat. In the private garden of the building, fountains glittered like liquid crystal. She stood there, silk gown damp from rain, hair clinging to her face, and he felt the line between control and surrender dissolve. The air was thick, charged, dangerous, and impossibly intimate. Words failed them both, leaving only the magnetic pull of something forbidden and exquisite. Dinner parties became battlegrounds of subtle provocations. She would lean close under the chandeliers, speak into his ear with whispered confessions meant for no one else, fingers grazing his wrist with deliberate intent. Every guest watched, oblivious to the silent war waged in glances and half smiles. He resisted the urge to claim her fully, the danger of exposure too high, the consequences unbearable. Yet, in private corners, behind locked doors, the chemistry between them ignited flames that threatened to consume everything he had built. She laughed at his restraint, challenged his stoicism, and the thrill of the chase sharpened with every stolen moment. Their passion was a duel, elegant, ferocious, and utterly irresistible. Late at night he found himself reading her letters again, tracing words meant for someone else, memorizing the curve of each line as if it were a map to her soul. He imagined rewriting them, changing the recipient to himself, and in the dark, whispered vows he hadn't yet spoken. Her name, unspoken yet omnipresent, echoed in his mind with the weight of confession. Every plan, every boardroom decision, every meticulously orchestrated empire seemed trivial compared to the tempest she had stirred. He wanted to be the man she never imagined, the one who would rewrite destinies with a single touch, a single word. And yet the city outside remained oblivious, a glittering witness to their clandestine, impossible passion. The night she confessed her fears, the world shifted. Candlelight danced on her face, illuminating every freckle, every tear, every tremor of her lips. "I can't promise what you want," she admitted, voice cracking. He reached for her hand, defiance and longing wrapped into a single, unsteady gesture. "Then I'll write the vows for both of us," he whispered, the words heavier than gold. Desire and dread collided in the space between them, and she hesitated, caught in the gravity of his gaze. Outside, thunder rumbled over the skyline, rain slicking the glass terrace, a mirror to the storm in their hearts. He leaned closer, ready to bridge the final inch, and the world held its breath. And then, just as his lips grazed hers, the penthouse doors burst open. A shadow moved across the threshold, a presence neither of them expected. The air thickened, charged with shock, danger, and a new, uninvited complication. He pulled back, eyes wide, heartbeat hammering, and she gasped, fingers clutching his jacket. Whoever it was, their arrival promised chaos, secrets, and betrayals that would threaten everything they had dared to build. And in that suspended moment, the rain pounding against the windows, the city lights flickering, and the storm raging outside, the question burned hotter than any desire. Could love survive a world built on power, deceit, and impossible timing? The answer hovered in the shadows, just beyond reach. He found her again in the library, where the scent of aged leather and rare books mingled with the faint perfume of her presence. She perched on the edge of a mahogany desk, legs swinging, eyes scanning a book she didn't read. He stepped closer, the subtle cologne of his tailored suit brushing against her senses. Their fingers brushed over the spine of a tome, a spark jolting up her arm. She looked up, lips parted, eyes wide, and for a moment the world contracted to the space between them. His hand hovered near hers, the heat of his body radiating danger and temptation. "You shouldn't be here alone," he murmured, voice low, teasing, magnetic. She smirked, hiding the tremor in her chest. "I'm never alone when you're nearby," she replied, and the faintest tension tightened between them, a storm of desire wrapped in restraint. At a gala overlooking the skyline, the city lights glittering like a field of stars, He moved beside her like a shadow, protective, unyielding. Every guest who dared approach her felt the weight of his gaze, a quiet threat that silenced even the boldest of social climbers. She noticed the tension in his jaw, the subtle curl of his lips when someone lingered too long near her. She leaned into him, the silk of her gown brushing his arm, feeling the heat of his body, the pulse of energy that always seemed to hum between them. For the first time, she realized the danger wasn't just the city, the press, or the men who coveted power. It was him, the one she wanted and feared. He whispered something private, something that made her chest tighten, and she shivered, knowing that whatever line existed between them had already begun to blur. Late-night conversations became confessions disguised as small talk. On the terrace, rain painting the city in streaks of silver, he spoke of responsibilities that weighed on him like lead. She admitted fears she hadn't told anyone, the loneliness behind smiles, the longing that terrified her. Their knees brushed under the marble railing, and the electricity of proximity crackled like a storm. He inhaled, caught in the fragrance of her hair, the warmth of her hand resting too close. "You make everything else feel meaningless," he said, voice barely audible. She swallowed, heart hammering, torn between disbelief and surrender. "And you make me want to risk everything," she whispered back. Time slowed, the storm outside a reflection of the one inside them, each confession peeling away layers they had long protected. In that fragile intimacy, walls crumbled, exposing raw vulnerability neither wanted to acknowledge. The twist came suddenly, like a knife in silk. She discovered a hidden room in his penthouse, files stacked in meticulous order, each dossier containing names, histories, and secrets she couldn't yet comprehend. Among them was her own past, details she had never shared, written in his handwriting, analyzed, catalogued. Betrayal flared in her chest. "Why?" she demanded, eyes flashing with hurt. He appeared behind her, calm but fierce, the heat of his presence brushing her neck. "Because I needed to know you were safe," he said, voice firm, almost tender. "Safe from what?" she asked, trembling. The gap between them widened, yet her body refused to retreat. "From the world, and from me," he admitted. A confession heavier than any promise. The revelation reframed everything. She wondered if the love she felt was ever for her, or merely for the woman he had meticulously studied. Enemies emerged like shadows at charity events, their smiles false, their eyes calculating. He circled her like a predator, subtle, commanding, warning anyone daring to come too close. She noticed it in the tightening of his jaw, the low rumble of his voice when he whispered threats only she could hear. Luxury and opulence surrounded them, but the tension was raw, dangerous, intimate. At the gala, a man lingered too long by her side, and she felt his hand brush her waist. Before she could react, his hand was there, firm, possessive, pressing a silent claim. She gasped, and the crowd around them seemed to vanish. For the first time, she saw the obsession in his eyes, the obsession that scared her as much as it drew her in. Desire and fear coiled together, unstoppable, unrelenting. A quiet moment in his private cinema revealed vulnerability few had seen. She leaned against the armrest, his presence so close she felt the heat radiating from him, smelled the subtle spice of his cologne. He handed her a glass of wine, their fingers brushing, lingering longer than socially acceptable. Their eyes met in the dim light, and the air hummed with tension, unspoken confessions floating between them. "Do you ever wonder if we're too reckless?" she asked, voice trembling. "No," he admitted, heart pounding, lips close enough she could feel his breath. "I've never felt more alive." They leaned toward each other, a slow-motion collision of desire, but the almost kiss hung there, suspended, fragile, dangerous. When the screen flickered, it was a cruel distraction, leaving the ache of what could be, what might never be, lingering. He learned her secret the same night, a truth she had buried beneath years of careful construction. She wasn't just a socialite, she was heir to a rival empire, one that threatened everything he had built. The weight of the revelation pressed on him, a mixture of admiration and dread. She tried to laugh it off, but the tremor in her voice betrayed the fear she carried. "You should hate me," she whispered, gaze downcast. He caught her chin, lifting her face with a gentle strength that contradicted the storm in his eyes. "I don't know if I can," he murmured, "because I love you. And now I have to decide if love is worth risking everything, including my empire." Her pulse hitched. The world felt like it had condensed into a single moment of heart-stopping intensity. Accusations erupted one evening in the penthouse kitchen, the night air thick with rain and tension. "You manipulate everything," she spat, hands shaking, eyes bright with hurt. "I protect everything," he countered, voice low, steady, but heavy with anger and longing. They circled each other, the space charged with betrayal and desire, each word a spark threatening to ignite. "Do you even feel this for me, or is it just control?" she demanded, tears brimming. His fingers brushed hers on the counter, a shock of electricity that silenced their shouting. "Every part of me is yours," he whispered, voice breaking, confession raw. "Even the part that terrifies me?" she asked, searching his eyes. "Even that," he said. And in that instant, the line between love and obsession blurred beyond recognition, leaving them exposed, trembling. Private late-night dances and empty ballrooms became their refuge. Crystal chandeliers reflected their silhouettes on the polished floors as he held her close, hips brushing, breaths mingling. The world outside the press, the rivalries, the empire ceased to exist. She rested her head against his chest, feeling the rhythm of a heart that had sworn never to love. "You're dangerous," she whispered against him. "So are you," he replied, lips grazing her hairline. Every touch, every stolen breath, amplified the tension between them, a magnetic pull neither could resist. They danced without music, the silence filled with longing, the kind of passion that threatened to undo every precaution they had built. And when their eyes met, stormy and electric, the almost kisses became undeniable promises, fragile yet irresistible. A storm outside mirrored the one inside their penthouse. Rain pelted the glass terrace, lightning illuminating the skyline. He pressed her against the balcony railing, hands firm on her waist, gaze piercing. "You have to trust me," he murmured, voice low, desperate. "Trust you, after everything," she whispered back, trembling. The city lights reflected in her wide eyes, desire and fear colliding. He leaned closer, fingers grazing her jaw, the scent of his cologne intoxicating, and she inhaled sharply, torn between retreat and surrender. "I can't promise the world," he confessed, lips near hers, "but I can promise you." The tension exploded, a heartbeat stretched too thin, and yet, the storm outside held them in suspended chaos, the air between them a fragile battlefield of emotion. An unexpected visitor shattered the fragile equilibrium, a woman from his past, elegantly dangerous, demanding and impossibly familiar. Her smile was sharp, eyes calculating, and she greeted him like a long-lost equal. The air thickened, jealousy tangling with desire. "I see you've found someone new," she purred. He didn't respond, but his hand tightened around hers instinctively. She noticed, and a thrill ran through her, equal parts possessive fear and temptation. "Who is she?" the woman pressed. He finally spoke, warning and electric. "She's the only one who matters." Yet, in the shadows, complications multiplied, alliances threatened, and the penthouse became a crucible where love, ambition, and obsession collided, leaving every heartbeat dangerous and every breath uncertain. Secrets from both their pasts collided one evening in the penthouse garden. Candles flickered in the wind, illuminating her shock when he revealed a clandestine deal that could destroy her family empire. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, tears brimming. "Because I had to protect you," he replied, gripping her arms, the warmth of his touch a lifeline. The wind whipped around them, but their eyes held, electric, desperate, intimate. Every breath was heavy with fear and longing. She realized then that love had never been simple, that desire could not be measured against morality or loyalty. And yet, the revelation drew them closer, dangerously, irreversibly. His confession hung between them like a blade, poised to cut or bind them forever. She stepped forward, closing the last inch, ready to risk everything for the impossible. In the private study, where golden lamplight spilled across shelves of rare books, their hands entwined, trembling with unspoken confessions. He traced the curve of her wrist, memorizing every detail, memorizing her, needing her. "I can't lose you," he whispered, voice rough with emotion. "And you won't," she said, matching his intensity, her chest pressed against his, their breaths mingling. The world outside the empires, the rivals, the expectations vanished, and yet, just as desire threatened to consume them, a phone rang, a single note of intrusion that could destroy everything. He froze, pulse racing, and she stepped back, alarm flashing in her eyes. The turning point had arrived. The core, the secret it carried, and the choice they had to make would determine if love survived or if obsession, duty, and danger would tear them apart forever. The countdown had begun. The contract marriage deadline loomed like a guillotine over their fragile entanglement. He had board meetings stacked one on top of the other, calls that could alter empires, and family demands that pressed like iron chains. She moved through the penthouse with tentative grace, sensing the tension tightening around him. At breakfast, champagne flutes clinked under a polite smile, but their eyes betrayed the desperate longing neither could voice. Every brush of her hand against his was a stolen lifeline. Every glance held promises they could not fully claim. Time was slipping, measured in signatures, deadlines, and whispered confessions. The city outside continued its relentless hum, oblivious to their hearts shattering under the weight of obligations. He wanted to tell her to leave, to preserve herself, but his body, his instincts, and his heart refused. Desire had become a weapon neither could disarm. Late that night she found him in the office, sleeves rolled, head in his hands, empire teetering and fragile. "I can't do this," he muttered, voice raw. She approached cautiously, feeling the ache of his struggle as if it were her own. "You don't have to," she whispered, fingers brushing his. The contact made him shiver. Restraint had failed, and the intensity of longing pulled them together. His hand caught hers, and suddenly the world outside, the family pressure, the corporate empire, the enemies circling, elapsed into insignificance. For a heartbeat, nothing existed but the heat of his hand, the desperation in her gaze. "I can't let you go," he admitted, voice breaking, her breath hitched, tears pricking. The weight of everything pressed down, yet in that small contact, they found a universe of unspoken promises and impossible desire. Enemies moved like predators. An exposed threatened to expose both of their secrets. The rivals planned to crush him and ruin her family empire. At the gala he stood behind her, a shield of tailored black and danger. Every whisper, every lingering look from other men drew the flash of his steel blue gaze. Her fingers clenched his, seeking safety, seeking reassurance. The chandeliers reflected their silhouettes, their closeness a declaration no one dared challenge. He leaned into her ear, voice low and trembling. "No one touches you. Not tonight. Not ever." She felt the rush of protection, obsession, and something far more fragile love. They danced through the night, a dangerous waltz of desire and obligation. Each step carried the weight of potential scandal, each breath a confession neither could fully articulate. The city hummed below, unawares two hearts collided in quiet rebellion. A single night changed everything. Rain hammered the penthouse terrace, blurring the skyline. He pulled her close, heat radiating, hair damp against his chest. "I can't stop wanting you," he whispered, voice hoarse, lips brushing her temple. She trembled, wrapped in the cocoon of his embrace, knowing the contract, the empire, the world outside demanded their separation. "I don't care anymore," she admitted, heart pounding. The honesty was dangerous, incendiary. Their lips met in a kiss that was part surrender, part defiance, a storm of passion against the backdrop of falling rain. Thunder rolled in response, echoing the tumult inside them. For a fleeting moment, the world ceased to exist. Deadlines, enemies, obligations, all vanished. Only the heat of two bodies, desperate and alive, mattered. When they finally pulled back, breath ragged, they understood the truth. Love demanded sacrifice, but neither knew yet what the cost would be. Morning brought reality like a hammer. His mother, regal and unforgiving, demanded he attend a corporate marriage negotiation with a woman deemed appropriate, wealthy, untouchable, convenient. He could barely listen as her words fell over him like mortars. Her eyes, glinting with defiance, caught his across the room. He imagined a life with her, a life stripped of contracts and obligations, and nearly lost himself in the fantasy. Every instinct screamed that she was the only one he wanted. But every duty, every expectation, pressed against his chest like a vice. In private, he burned the contract documents, feeling the sharp thrill of rebellion. Yet even as paper crumbled into ash, the clock ticked. He could save her, claim her, risk everything, but doing so meant stepping off a precipice that might never allow a return. The struggle between desire and duty had never been sharper. Late-night conversations revealed the fractures inside them. Sitting by the fireplace, shadows dancing across her face, she admitted fears she had long buried, the possibility that he loved the idea of her, not her. He listened, hands tight around his glass, cologne drifting between them, tension so thick it was nearly tactile. "I don't want you to doubt me," he said, voice low, breaking the silence. "Then prove it," she whispered, heart trembling. Every word, every pause, every breath carried weight. His fingers brushed hers, electric, almost intimate, and she leaned closer, drawn into the orbit of his obsession. "I'll prove it," he murmured, lips dangerously close, hearts hammering, the city beyond oblivious to the quiet, devastating intimacy unfolding. Time was short, danger lurked, and yet, in that room, love dared to bloom against impossibility. An unexpected figure from her past appeared, her father's rival, an empire's threat, a man with the power to ruin them both. He cornered her in the study, words sharp, demanding allegiance she could not give. He arrived, thunderous and commanding, taking the space between them. "She's mine," he spat, a declaration that silenced the room. Eyes locked, the rival seethed, yet he stood unflinching, hand on her back, guiding her to safety. She felt the weight of his protection, the raw heat of obsession and love. The storm outside mirrored the one inside. She realized then the stakes, not just desire, but survival, trust, sacrifice. The lines between love, duty, and obsession blurred into a chaotic symphony. He whispered, lips brushing her ear, "No one will take you from me. Not ever." The words, simple and fierce, ignited something irreversible. The city erupted in scandal the following day. Arrival expos hitting headlines, threatening to unravel everything he had built. He faced the board, icy, untouchable, yet his mind was elsewhere. She appeared at the office, defiance in her stance, daring the world to challenge her. Their eyes met across the room, and the space between them crackled with tension and longing. He wanted to take her in his arms, shield her from every storm, but decorum demanded distance. The meeting ended, decisions made, empires teetered, and yet, in the quiet aftermath, they stole a single, desperate moment in the elevator. Fingertips brushed, breath mingled, hearts collided. He wanted to tell her she was the only empire that mattered, but the words remained unspoken, trapped behind fear and desire. The city buzzed outside, but for them, nothing existed except this fleeting, burning contact. The night before the final contract deadline, they fled to the private terrace. Rain soaked them, silk clinging, hair plastered to skin. He cupped her face, thumb brushing tears mixed with rain. "If I let you go," he murmured, voice trembling, "I'll never forgive myself." She shook her head, lips trembling. "Then don't." They kissed, fierce, consuming, the world and deadlines and enemies obliterated in that embrace. Thunder cracked, lightning illuminated the city skyline, reflecting the chaos and intensity of their passion. She whispered against his lips, "I'd burn everything for you." His eyes caught hers, storm and fire mirrored in pupils wide with longing. In that instant, love and risk collided, and nothing else mattered. For the first time, Surrender felt like salvation, and the future, uncertain and dangerous, seemed worth it. Morning brought confrontation. His mother's voice thundered over breakfast, demanding adherence to duty, to expectation. He pushed back, calm yet resolute, eyes locked on hers, daring anyone to intervene. She rose, walking to his side, silk brushing against his tailored suit. "We're not asking," she said, soft yet powerful, voice carrying the weight of decision. The room froze. He glanced at her, the gravity of her choice mirrored in her gaze, and he realized she would risk everything. The power dynamics shifted. They were equal partners now, united by desire, by love, by the audacity to defy the world. Every breath between them hummed with anticipation and inevitability. The family's demands, the empire's rules, the contracts looming threatened meaningless against the force of two hearts determined to claim each other. A new chapter had begun, forged in defiance and longing. He stood on the penthouse balcony as night fell, rain slicking the city in silver streaks, wind tearing at hair and fabric alike. The phone buzzed with corporate threats, deadlines, and ultimatums. He let it ring, ignored it, and inhaled the scent of wet asphalt, the city electric beneath him. Behind him she appeared, soaked, defiant, beauty untamed by storm. "I choose you," he said simply, voice carrying over the thunder. She smiled, tears mixing with raindrops, lips trembling with relief and passion. He took her hand, dragging her into a kiss that burned hotter than any empire, any contract, any enemy. Time froze. Rain became their witness, wind their applause. The city lights flickered, powerless against the storm of love consuming them. For the first time, he didn't hesitate. She mattered more than anything else, more than control, more than power, more than duty. Enemies lurked, but the empire could wait. They destroyed the last contract together, ashes scattering over the polished marble terrace, a declaration of rebellion and devotion. He held her, hips pressed, breath mingling, heart hammering, and she whispered, "We did it." The weight of choice, the danger, the longing, everything, collapsed into this moment. The scent of rain and her perfume filled him, intoxicating and grounding. "We have everything now," he murmured, voice low, eyes locked on hers. Tears streaked, rain-drenched, but she smiled, relief and desire shining equally. Every obstacle, every threat, every stolen moment had led here. They didn't just survive the storm, they claimed each other. And as the city sprawled below, unaware, they knew love had finally won. Fierce, consuming, unstoppable, nothing else mattered. In the quiet aftermath, alone in the penthouse library, she leaned against him, hands clasped, head on his chest. The world outside still raged demels, rivals, family pressures, but inside, time slowed. He traced her fingers with his thumb, memorizing curves, lines, warmth, her very essence. "I almost lost you," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Almost," she replied, lifting her head, eyes bright with tears and laughter. "But you didn't." Silence settled, but not empty, charged, intimate, sacred. They had risked everything, broken rules, defied the impossible. And in that quiet intimacy they tasted the victory of love earned, not given. Every heartbeat spoke promise. Every breath whispered desire. Outside, the city buzzed and stormed, but inside, the world belonged to them. For once, they didn't have to fight. They could simply be two hearts bound, fierce and unrelenting, against everything else. He kissed her forehead, lingering, memorizing, and she pressed into him, both trembling. "No one else," he murmured, voice low, fierce. "No one," she echoed. The penthouse, the skyline, the empire all meaningless compared to the heat between them. And for the first time, he could imagine forever, untethered from contracts, expectations, and duty. Only her, only them, only this. The storm outside slowed, rain fading into mist, but inside, desire and love burned brighter than ever. They clung to each other, knowing every moment had led to this fragile, unstoppable, impossible victory. And for the first time in both their lives, surrender didn't mean weakness, it meant triumph. Hearts aligned, storms weathered, the impossible conquered. Love, against all odds, had won. Morning sunlight spilled across the penthouse, soft and golden, illuminating the quiet peace that had settled over them. The city below hummed gently, no storms, no deadlines, no enemies pressing close. He moved through the kitchen, shirt sleeves rolled, hands deftly brewing coffee with a patience that felt almost sacred. She leaned against the marble counter, hair messy from sleep, eyes drinking him in with a quiet awe. This was no longer a contract, no longer obligation or risk. It was simple. It was them. He handed her a cup, the warmth between his fingers a promise. She smiled, soft and knowing, feeling the steady pulse of love that had taken root in every shared storm, every stolen moment, every desperate choice. She realized, with a depth that surprised her, that this ordinary quiet morning was forever. And he was hers, wholly, without conditions or contracts. The city lights faded in the distance as they moved to the terrace, wrapped in blankets, coffee warming their hands. Silence stretched comfortably between them, punctuated only by the distant hum of traffic and the occasional laugh from the streets below. He brushed a damp strand of hair from her face, thumb lingering along her cheekbone, tracing lines he had memorized in moments of longing. We've come so far, she whispered, voice soft, almost reverent. He nodded, pulling her closer until her head rested against his chest. Every heartbeat was a rhythm they had fought to synchronize. Every breath a reminder of battles survived and love claimed. She pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the steady thrum beneath her palm, and thought of all the nights that had led to this storm-soaked, desperate, impossible nights. Now, finally, they had quiet, and quiet, she realized, was the most exquisite intimacy. They explored the penthouse together, rediscovering spaces once tense with longing and fear. The library, where their almost kisses had teased their patience, now felt like a sanctuary. He pulled a chair close, and she sat beside him, shoulders brushing, hands intertwined. Sunlight danced across the spines of old books, painting gold over the moments etched into these rooms. He opened a volume of poetry, reading aloud softly, his voice low and intimate. She rested her head on his shoulder, listening, absorbing, feeling each word wrap around them like a blanket. No deadlines, no contracts, no enemies, just the echo of shared confessions, whispered apologies, and promises that had grown into something undeniable. In that quiet, reflective space, she understood that love had not only survived, had transformed everything around them, turning opulent rooms into sacred havens, danger into devotion, contracts into the story that led to their forever. Afternoons became gentle explorations of life rebuilt together. He showed her the rooftop garden, a secret oasis above the city, where flowers bloomed against steel and glass. They wandered through paths lined with fragrant blooms, fingers brushing, laughter spilling like music. She marveled at the contrast, the empire below, the chaos that once governed their lives, and here serenity. He bent to pick a white rose, offering it with a shy, almost boyish smile. She accepted, inhaling the delicate scent, realizing how intimately connected their lives had become. This was no longer a battle of wills, a dance of danger and desire. It was a slow, tender rhythm, built on trust, shared history, and unspoken devotion. The city might demand power, rivals might whisper threats, but here, among petals and sunlight, they were only themselves, and that alone was enough to make their hearts whole. One evening, he led her to the private cinema, lights dim, curtains drawn, a single candle flickering on the console. He gestured for her to sit, then disappeared briefly, returning with a box small enough to rest in her lap. She looked up, curiosity and apprehension dancing in her eyes. He knelt on one knee, the candlelight illuminating a rare vulnerability in his expression. "We began with a contract," he said, voice thick with emotion, "but I don't want to live a single day without a choice. I choose you, not obligation, not empire, you." She gasped, tears pricking, hands trembling. "Will you marry me truly with no strings attached?" he asked, eyes locking hers, steady and infinite. Her answer came in a whispered yes, a word carrying every storm they had survived, every longing, every sacrifice. The penthouse felt like it exhaled in relief, holding its breath for their victory. Nights became rituals of closeness. He brushed her hair, head in her lap, fingers tracing the line of her jaw, memorizing curves, memorizing breaths. She pressed herself into his chest, feeling the warmth of his body, the rhythm of a heartbeat that had once been guarded but now belonged to her. Conversation dwindled, replaced by quiet sighs and lingering touches, the intimacy more profound than any passion-fueled storm. He whispered promises she had already seen lived in his eyes: protection, devotion, presence. "I never want to leave you," he murmured, voice low and unshakable. She lifted her head, lips brushing his, and whispered, "Then don't." That simple instruction became a covenant, a vow unspoken but binding. The world could wait. Power, deadlines, obligations, secondary. In these moments, their love was absolute, unassailable, tender yet ferocious, quiet yet searing in its intensity. They existed only for each other. Morning light revealed simple joys. He made her coffee, humming softly, steam curling between them like a ribbon of calm. She watched him, marveling at the ease of the gesture, at the intimacy of ordinary acts made extraordinary by love. "I never imagined mornings could feel like this," she admitted softly. He smiled, brushing hair from her face, eyes tender. "Every day with you makes the impossible feel ordinary," he said. They sipped coffee, shoulders touching, laughter spilling in quiet bursts. She realized she had finally stepped fully into a life without contracts, obligations, or fear, a life where he chose her every day, and she in turn chose him. The simplicity was revolutionary, more intoxicating than the storms they had endured. She pressed her hand over his heart, feeling the pulse, the reality, the permanence of everything they had built together. One evening, standing on the balcony, city lights flickering below like tiny constellations, he wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close. The wind tangled their hair, rain a distant memory, replaced by warmth and quiet certainty. "I love you," she whispered, voice carrying the weight of all they had survived. He smiled, a rare unguarded smile that softened the sharp angles of his life, that reached deep into her soul. "And I love you," he said, voice steady, infinite, containing everything: desire, obsession, devotion, surrender. The skyline stretched endlessly, but in that moment, their universe contracted to the space between their hearts, their hands, their breaths. No contracts, no enemies, no pasts could touch them now. Only this, two souls, irrevocably entwined, finally free. They revisited the library where so much tension had begun. She ran fingers along the spines of books, his hand covering hers, grounding her, claiming her. "This used to feel like a battlefield," she murmured. "Now it's our home," he said, voice low, confident. She leaned into him, inhaling the scent of old pages and his cologne, marveling at how spaces once charged with longing and fear now radiated warmth and security. The penthouse itself seemed transformed, reflecting the love and care they poured into it. Curtains hung differently, chairs repositioned, light softening the shadows of past storms. It was theirs entirely, irrevocably, and in that intimacy, in the quiet brush of fingers and murmured laughter, she knew the final truth. Love had not only survived the chaos, it had redefined every corner of their world. They took long walks across the terrace, hands entwined, laughing as the city below moved in oblivion to their triumph. Nights stretched into dawns filled with whispered confessions, shared dreams, and lingering touches that carried the weight of all they had endured. Every heartbeat was a reminder of battles survived, enemies faced, and the impossible odds overcome. She pressed her cheek to his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm, the warmth, the unspoken promises of forever. "We're really here," she whispered, voice trembling with awe and relief. He kissed the top of her head, holding her as if to physically guard her from every future storm. "We are," he replied, voice thick with certainty, "and nothing will ever change that." The city lights glittered, a soft symphony celebrating the triumph of love against the improbable. In the private cinema, they recreated the first almost kiss, only this time without hesitation. He cupped her face, lips capturing hers in a slow, deliberate kiss that carried everything: longing, triumph, devotion, and surrender. Tears mingled with laughter, breaths tangled, and the weight of all past fears dissolved. For the first time, there was no need for restraint, no contracts, no hidden agendas. She rested her head on his chest afterward, listening to the heartbeat that had once terrified her, now a steady, grounding force. "I want to live every day like this," she whispered. He held her tighter, chin resting atop her head. "And you will," he murmured, in that perfect quiet. They understood that love had not only claimed them, it had remade them, built them anew in the calm after every storm. Sunsets became their sacred moments. Wrapped in blankets on the terrace, she rested her head against him, fingers tracing patterns on his hand. The skyline glowed, the city softened, and they breathed together, synchronized, infinite. He whispered plans, dreams, half-formed ideas of a life they could shape together. She responded with laughter, warmth, and a confidence that surprised even her. Every touch, every word, every glance cemented their bond. The past, once a landscape of danger and desire, now seemed distant. "I never thought I'd find you in all this chaos," she said softly. He tilted her chin, eyes locking, filled with a rare softness. "You found me," he replied, voice low, intimate, infinite, "and now I'm yours." Her smile, the quiet joy in her eyes, made him feel lighter than the wealth and power he had spent decades chasing. Evenings settled into ritualized intimacy, quiet moments where no words were needed. She perched on the terrace railing, he behind her, hands clasped, wind teasing strands of hair across her face. "Do you remember the beginning?" she asked, voice soft, reflective. He chuckled, low, recalling the tension, storms, and impossible stakes. "How could I forget?" he murmured, brushing her hair behind her ear. They laughed together, a sound full of relief, love, and triumph. No enemies, no deadlines, no contracts, just them. She rested against him, breath warm, heart steady. "I love that we survived everything," she whispered. "I love that we did it together," he said. And in that moment, surrounded by city lights, wind, and quiet intimacy, they realized their love had not only endured, it had been forged, tempered, and made eternal. The final morning of their journey arrived soft and serene. He brewed coffee. She watched sunlight spill across her hair, golden, radiant. He handed her a cup, their fingers brushing a spark, a memory, a reminder of everything they had overcome. She smiled, leaning against him, absorbing the simplicity of the act, the depth of the intimacy. "I never knew mornings could feel this profound," she said softly. "Neither did I," he replied, voice tender, steady, infinite. The empire, the contracts, the chaos all felt distant, trivial. They existed in this perfect now, a world of warmth, laughter, and quiet devotion. Her hand rested on his chest, over the steady heartbeat that had claimed her, saved her, and made her feel indestructible. "Forever," she whispered. He smiled, brushing lips across her temple. "Forever," he echoed, and in that single word, the promise of everything they survived and achieved resonated. At twilight, they stood together on the terrace, city lights glittering beneath them like constellations brought to earth. His arms circled her waist, pulling her close, steady and unwavering. She pressed her cheek to his chest, breath mingling with his, heartbeats synchronized. "You make the impossible feel like home," she whispered, voice carrying the weight of storms survived, passion endured, and love claimed. He chuckled softly, warmth spreading through his chest, the kind of smile that lit his eyes with a light she had never seen before. "And you," he murmured, tilting her chin, eyes infinite, "made me feel alive when I swore I never would." The city sprawled endlessly beneath them, indifferent to the love that had conquered every obstacle, yet they didn't care. Strangers had become each other's world. Contracts had become gifts. Love had been found in the most unexpected places, fierce, unrelenting, and eternal.